I just realized I've been muted the whole time. Ron, you didn't
Yes,
say anything. I was chatting away.
I didn't want to interrupt. You look
It's so rude.
you look like you were on a roll,
I'm Anthony Davis. He's Ron Filipkowski. I'm sorry for the silence. The mute button is, so very small. This is the show where we uncover the MAGA propaganda that is otherwise not covered by the mainstream media. And I was just going on to say that, isn't it interesting how the mainstream media as a phrase used to be just used by the right and the far right to kind of criticize, but actually everybody now realizes how much of the mainstream media is failing in its responsibility to highlight the rise of fascism in the West with Donald Trump and the MAGA Republicans. And, there's a whole lot going on that really they are ignoring. And that is a frustration for me. I'm sure it is for you too, Ron.
I boil over sometimes. It's really why I said I've had to stop watching cable news a lot, and I enjoy it, but it gets so frustrating, especially when they interview Republicans, because I pay so close attention to these guys, and I kind of know what they have to say and what they think, and I watch them on podcasts. So I have all these questions in my head that I would like to ask them, and yet it just seems like the same old horse race style questions over and over again that media asks these guys, and it's just so tired and played out and boring.
Yeah, I was thinking maybe as a side hustle, I could maybe do some consultancy for the networks and teach their journalists how to ask questions, because, I don't know. I kind of feel I'm only doing that out of desperation, not out of necessity, because I really feel that this is a moment in history where everybody should be pulling together. Can you imagine, like in a year's time, historians will be writing about the time that the U.S. failed to recognize the rise of a dictatorship and just chose to drop the ball, and the media played a huge part in that? It would be a very sad story.
I talked to a senior reporter this past weekend about this, and I was so frustrated. And she said, "Well, we don't really get to interview Trump anymore. He's so in a protected bubble, and he only does interviews with right wingers." I said, "Well, at some point in the campaign, he's going to open himself up." And I said, "If you know of any, mainstream outlet that's going to interview him, fly me in, give me 20 minutes to prep you. I'll give you 10 questions that he's never been asked before.
Right.
And every one of them will stump him." And so I said, and the other thing is, you can ask those same questions to Trump surrogates, because you're getting to interview them. You could at least ask a Tim Scott these questions.
Yes. My dream would be to interview Mike Johnson, the new Speaker of the House, because I have a lot that I reckon that he could be put on the spot for. And as you and I have discussed before, and I used to train politicians with speeches. I've had interesting jobs in the media and in politics, but entrapment is the way you do it. So you prepare questions that entrap them so that they cannot give an alternative answer. And this is something I am not seeing. And unfortunately, on shows like Meet the Press and that type of thing, there is a failure of duty, and it's very frustrating.
Yeah.
And I personally have always had a rule that I would never criticize other people in journalism. That's always been something I've been very proud of. Keep stum about other people's work, but democracy, Ron, is on the line.
It's on the line.
Different, right?
I agree with you.
Changed.
I don't think I ever posted a single tweet criticizing a member of the media before this a few months ago. And I'm doing it more and more. I don't really want to.
Yeah. I feel the same. I did one the other day where I wrote, "This is not journalism." And that is, it's very sad indictment, because, there are some great journalists in the US. Unfortunately, they're just not on cable news or mainstream news. Okay, let's talk about some of the conspiracies that are going on in the far right and the movement, this MAGA Republican movement that Donald Trump represents now. And the latest big one is the Taylor Swift conspiracy. Tell me about this.
The big one, yeah. It seems that pretty clear that there's no one in politics that Republicans fear more than Taylor Swift. They're very afraid of her influence, her ability to influence voters. One of the things that got them rattled is they did a new poll that showed, I think it was 18% of Taylor Swift followers basically just said they don't follow politics. They have no strong opinion either way, and they'll just vote for whoever Taylor tells them to vote for. Well, that pretty much set them off, And then the relationship with what their conspiracy is that this is all being orchestrated by the Biden campaign, her relationship with the football player, Travis Kelce, because the idea is that they know this is their theory that they already planned on Taylor Swift is going to endorse Biden, which she did in 2020. But this time she's going to get more involved, more active in turning out young, particularly women voters. But the relationship with Kelce, who is also the face of Bud Light, who's considered a woke brand, and Pfizer, the vaccines, that she's combining with him not only to cross over her appeal to the middle America rural voters, but to tap into that beer drinking white male rural football fan base, using Travis Kelce as part of this op and to lure those voters in as well. So yeah, they're pretty apoplectic about what is playing out, which in reality is probably just a very nice relationship from a young couple who
nothing is playing
love each
out.
other.
This is the point, isn't it? Nothing is playing out. All of this is
organic.
in the minds of it's organic. And meanwhile, Taylor Swift's going about her business and just doing her thing, and she has every right to, be political if she wants to, as many kind of music industry people have over the years. But it's just so weird that they would waste their time on this stuff. Let me play the clip of the OAN host who says it makes sense for Biden to have Taylor Swift date Travis Kelce in this deep state conspiracy. Here it is.
America's pop star celebrity sweetheart joins forces with the top dog in the NFL, playing for the team that's going to the Super Bowl. I mean, let's be real here. This is bread and circuses on steroids. Major League Sports, in and of itself, is nothing but a psyop. Get kids plugged into the cycle of going to public indoctrination camps, playing sports for their school, and going to games. Many end up devoting their entire childhood to competing in various sports, only to be cut from the team, at which point they become brainwashed into supporting professional teams because they know their dreams of becoming a pro athlete will probably never happen. So then they become obsessed with some grown man who gets paid millions of dollars every year to throw a ball around while promoting poison death shots and child slave labor through various brand deals and endorsements. So sad. Imagine being so...
So what is it with this thing? I mean, are they using it because they think that they can grow an audience on the One America news network by just talking garbage, or is there a genuine feeling amongst MAGA Republicans that Taylor Swift is, a danger to their chances of re-election?
I think it's a combination. I think for Fox, for example, like the TV networks, it's all about ratings, and anytime they can do a segment on Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce, even to criticize them, it's good for their ratings, and they understand that. And I think for a lot of these social media people on the right, that's also part of it. I wrote an article about this, and I said, you have to really sift through the clickbait ones, like that Nick Adams guy did, and another guy, the IQ 187. Some of these people are just putting things out there as clickbait to get people worked up. But there are a legitimate segment, a big chunk of legitimate segment, like Charlie Kirk, Jack Posobiec. There's a number of them who absolutely believe that this is a real thing. Donald Trump Jr. also, who believe that this is a real psychological operation being done. They even think it's being orchestrated out of the Pentagon. So there's some pretty far out conspiracy. So it's not all clickbait. There is a very real concern that Taylor Swift is Joe Biden's secret weapon.
Let me show a clip of Jack Posobiec doing exactly that.
Wellness movement, the millions watching back TV, when we do the podcast, when we do War Room, when we do human events, right? That's who we got. And so that's who we have to go to war with. And so when it comes to winning these elections, we have to understand the new game. And when I talk about Taylor Swift, I say it's so obvious to me. She's the perfect vehicle to go to those low propensity white liberal women to say, I need you to come out. I need you to come out for what? What'll be the issue? It'll be abortion, right? Abortion will be the issue. You need to come out. You need to get out on here. And we can all see it. I'm sorry? I hope you're right. I hope you're right. But unfortunately, I have to live in the world of what's, what potential threats could be out there. And the indicators and warnings right now are going off the charts that,
Never take questions during a speech. You should know that. I mean, just explain who this guy is, because I don't think people realize quite how dangerous this man has been over the recent years.
Yeah, I'll talk about Jack in 1 second. But, at the end of that clip, which I agree not to play all of it, but
Yep.
he talks about the fact that the right is going to counteract the Taylor Swift effect with celebrities of their own. And they're going to roll out Kid Rock,
John Voight.
And John Voight and Ted Nugent.
That's right. Yeah, they're gonna kill it with those three.
So what he talks about is like, she's going to get those low information voters, those people that don't watch cable news, that aren't on political social media, that again don't follow the issues, that she can influence them, and I believe that is true. But the people that he's talking about are not going to reach any non-fanatical right wingers. I mean, they just preach to their choir. By the way, speaking of John Voight, he used to do these crazy, very dark videos, pro-Trumpy videos. And I just checked because I'm like, am I unfollowed from him or something? Because I hadn't heard from him in a long time. He actually hasn't put one out since the beginning of November, which is very odd. He used to do one every couple weeks.
Yeah, so I would watch those occasionally.
Yeah, I don't know what's up with Voight. But
hopefully he's okay. He's an old man, he's a champ. I want to talk about one of the most important issues right now is obviously the border deal, because there are multiple things riding on it, and that is the funding to Ukraine, but also funding for the support of Israel as well. And so, it's a bit of a touchy subject in Washington because Republicans have been proven. It's been proven multiple times now that Donald Trump is the puppet master, and he's the one saying, I do not want you to do a deal on the border until after the election, when I will deal with it. And that was admitted to by several people, including the Speaker of the House himself, who's been making some ridiculous appearances recently and contradicting himself. So, where do we go from here, considering the fact that this is very important, and politics aside, this funding needs to be found?
The border issue is one that's very easy to demagogue for right wingers. I mean, it's shut them all, shut the border down, don't let anybody in, and deport everybody. I mean, that's very simple messaging. It's easy to put out there, and the problem is, for Democrats, we could talk about the deal because that's important too. But the problem is for Democrats is that the reality of the border situation is very complex and with a lot of moving parts, and it's very complicated. And you can't explain it in a slogan or a sentence or 3 words like close the border, deport everybody. It's complicated. And because when you have to explain why those things are not feasible or reasonable or possible, those require long explanations. For example, just to detain everybody at the border, we haven't had enough bed space in detention facilities at the border for years, for a decade. They've all been overcrowded. The reason why we can't detain people at the border is because we don't have the facilities to be able to do that. And that's one of the things that was in this border package. The funding package is more money to build those facilities, to be able to take people and house them, to adjudicate their asylum claims faster, to be able to deport them faster if they don't qualify. These are all the things that are in the proposal, but those are hard to explain. And Trump can go around and say, oh, nobody came in the border when I was president. That's basically what, he demagogues. And the reality is we averaged about 600,000 for his 4 years. We averaged about 600,000 people came into the United States, and he did not deport as many each year as the Biden administration. Now, those numbers have definitely gone up, during Biden, but they were still significant under Trump, and nothing was done. And by the way, the border package that has been negotiated by James Lankford, who is a Republican senator from Oklahoma, as Lankford has pointed out, this package is the exact same package that Trump requested in 2018 when he was president and couldn't get it passed. So the package that Trump is against now is exactly what he asked for in 2018. But of course, we know why he doesn't want it now, because the border is his number one campaign issue.
Let's take a look at Senator James Lankford, who appeared on Fox Sunday.
That are not being enforced. So why give him this in an election year, the cover of this deal that, you know, critics say is still going to let a lot of people in, but he gets to take a victory lap that he's gotten something done?
Yeah, well, it's definitely not going to let a bunch of people in. It's focused on actually turning people around on it. It is interesting. Republicans 4 months ago would not give funding for Ukraine, for Israel, and for our southern border because we demanded changes in policy. So we actually locked arms together and said, we're not going to give you money for this. We want a change in law. And now it's interesting, a few months later, when we're finally getting to the end, they're like, oh, just kidding. I actually don't want a change in law because it's a presidential election year. We all have an oath to the Constitution, and we have a commitment to say we're going to do whatever we can to be able to secure the border. Just as a quick, for instance, the last 4 months, we've had 50 people cross our border on the terror watch list. 50. We've had tens of thousands of people that were declared by this administration a national security risk that came across our border and were released. It is our constitutional obligation to be able to secure our country as fast as we can secure our country. This puts in mandatory pieces that haven't been there in the past to make this administration actually enforce the law. I would tell you that I don't know of anyone that believes that if President Trump was elected, well, he was president right now, this border would not have this problem. So the thought that somehow President Biden can suddenly be the pro-national security president in the final months of this is...
Yeah. Meanwhile, they're about to impeach the guy whose job it is to manage the border, get him out of the picture. I mean, it's so obvious. Their tactics are so obvious to anybody. Do you think it's getting through to Republicans, MAGA Republicans, that any of this is a stunt? Is theatrical, it's not really based in truth or fact?
I think some of them understand that, but I think some of them, no, I think the majority of them, look, this is a winning issue for them. The new consult poll that just came out showed that in the 7 battleground swing states for the presidential election, in 6 of those 7 states, swing voters were asked what is their number one concern. And their number one concern was immigration and the border. These are swing voters. These are not MAGA voters. And so Republicans see those numbers and realize that this is a winning issue for them. And it's also why the administration is spending so much time and effort right now to try and get a deal done. And I think that Lankford is in an unenviable position because over the decades, any Republican that has been designated as the person in the Senate to negotiate a compromise on immigration always gets roasted by his own party. So Mitch put up Lankford to do this because Lankford not only was just reelected and is to a new 6-year term and is in a safe place like Oklahoma where there's no Democratic challengers, but he did it without Trump support. A MAGA person ran against him in a primary, and Trump did not back Lankford, and Lankford soundly defeated that candidate. So Lankford isn't really worried about MAGA backlash. So he's negotiating this, but he's kind of out on an island. The question is, how many senators agree with Lankford's deal? My guess is enough to pass it, to get the 60 votes. But the problem is, of course, Mike Johnson in the House, who's made it clear that Trump calls him all the time. And he went out and gave a statement today where he said, that we have to get to 0 crossings before he would agree to a deal. We've never been at 0 crossings. We weren't even close to that during the Trump administration. So basically what he's saying is, I'm not doing anything on the border.
And so what will the effect be for Ukraine and for Israel? I mean, because have Democrats done the right thing tying these 3 issues together?
I think they did the right thing by trying to do that. But now the question is going to be, if Johnson isn't going to budge, if he won't bring this to the floor, if he won't negotiate with the Senate, and the polls don't reverse on this, and he doesn't don't take any hit in the polls for that position, then the Senate and the administration are going to have to decide if they want to decouple the issue and to just do separate Ukraine-Israel packages, get that done, and just leave the border up to politics, because that's probably where we're headed. That's probably what's going to have to happen. And hopefully it will resonate that with the American people that it was Mike Johnson and Donald Trump who have made this problem worse. But Republicans are betting that they can demagogue the issue. And my suspicion is they're probably right. They probably can.
We shouldn't underestimate the significance of the attempted impeachment of Alexander Mayorkas, right? Because this has never been done in history, to take somebody who's effectively a department head. He hasn't broken the law. He hasn't broken the Constitution. He hasn't done anything that he said or he's done everything that he said he was going to do. He's stuck because this deal is stuck, and yet they are attempting to impeach him, and probably will. It won't get ratified in the Senate, but certainly, Congress. This has got to be Donald Trump saying, they impeached me, you got to get a couple of impeachments, right?
Well, I think that it's bigger than that. That's part of it. But yes, we haven't had a cabinet secretary impeached in 150 years. I think it was 1877 was the last time, and here we are. But no, this is really not about Alexander Mayorkas. I don't think that the Republicans really care that much about him. And I think that they fully understand that, look, he is an administrator. He is carrying out the policy of the Biden administration. And the Biden administration had some policy changes on the border when they came in, and he implemented them and carried them out. And so they're sort of mad at him for following the policy, but they understand what they want with this impeachment is to keep the border in the news, as they've been successful at doing in the past week. Keep it out there, and have a trial in the Senate on Mayorkas, and that puts the whole border issue on the front pages. And every day that the border is the front headline of the newspaper or the news is a winning day for the Republicans.
And tragically, imagine being Alejandro Mayorkas in this moment. Imagine being a victim of this Republican wrath and having to, knowing that you're actually deporting and arresting more people than ever before in history, more than Trump did, that you've managed to negotiate with Mexico to pay for new technology, that you've just opened 2 checkpoints because the numbers went down so much. If he was having to reapply for his job, he would have been doing very well. And yet he is facing a very public impeachment.
That's because there's one key part missing. I think that Mayorkas is a very effective administrator. I think he's a hard worker. I think he's conscientious. I think he cares a lot about doing the right thing, all of that stuff.
Yeah.
But the one key ingredient that's missing is the communication part of the job, which is part of the job. And I don't think Mayorkas is an especially effective communicator, and he's certainly not a hardcore fighter. He's not someone who's going to go into Congress and go into the Senate and mix it up and fight back and argue and give it as good as he gets. He's just not that kind of a personality. He's not going to do that on the Sunday shows. And I think that that's a big problem. I mean, I do think that that's an important part of the job. The job is not just administration. It's not just policy. You also have to be an effective. Buttigieg is an excellent communicator, and he's very good at selling the administration's policies on transportation. I don't think Mayorkas is as good at that. And the question is, how important is that? Well, being a good administrator is more important, yes, but in a democracy, especially on the border where you know that this is going to be the Republicans' #1 issue, you got to have, I think, a better communicator. He at least needs to have a spokesperson then. If he can't do it, a spokesperson needs to come out and do it for him.
Well, a little bit like with COVID, they should be having regular weekly or bi-weekly press conferences specific to this issue.
Yep.
Where they are dealing with each matter in hand, and then a press secretary can do it. I always found this very frustrating with Democrats, particularly, that there wasn't more of a production. And look, when the January 6th event, the investigation was aired on television, they brought in a CBS news producer to produce it, to make sure that it was newsworthy and made for television. And they were largely successful. Got 20 million viewers on the first episode of those televised hearings. And I think
right.
that it should be the same, right?
That is a perfect example and a perfect analogy of what I mean. Imagine if the administration ever tried to do something like that on the border, where, think of all the Republican photo ops and things that they've done down on the border, and all these dog and pony shows. They've done hundreds of them for the media. And the counter from the administration and from the Democrats is nothing, is silence. We have nothing going back the other way. And so that was my frustration for years, is that I didn't understand. I understand it a lot better now because I've done my homework, but I didn't understand the administration's border policy for a couple of years because they never talked about it. But I've since found out on my own, but they still really don't.
But politics should be boring, as I keep saying. It should be administrative. It should not be show business. And unfortunately, in many countries, we had it in England with Boris Johnson, these populists, they make a production out of things. And because, it's all about them. And because Joe Biden is not one of those characters,
right? Because
he's a public servant and, a former public defender, and, we know his history. He doesn't really see the made-for-TV version of how American politics kind of needs to be presented in order to cut through the noise these days.
Yeah, I mean, Obama understood it. Clinton certainly did. Reagan, Trump, of course. There are politicians who understand that the showmanship is part of the gig. Yes, and Joe Biden has never been that guy, going all the way back to the 70s and the 80s. He's always been a policy guy, and he loves to crunch numbers and all that, which is great. I mean, those people govern very well. It's just that sometimes on elections, things can get a little dicey.
I love that Joe Biden's never changed. I heard someone say that recently. Like, for all the criticism of him being, with the speech impediment and with being a bit doddery and all of this stuff, he's been like that his whole life. And, this is not really, him aging in public. This is just who he is. And there needs to be a certain acceptance of the fact that this is who he is. A very successful president in terms of policy. But, what more do you want? Do you want a scandal? Because we had them every day with Donald Trump.
Yeah. And he's following somebody like Obama, a very dynamic Democratic president, very popular. And it's a hard act to follow, for anybody. So, but one could certainly argue that from a policy standpoint, Joe Biden has been more successful and more progressive than Obama in many respects.
Yes, I would agree. I just want to talk about Ted Cruz for a second, because he's been under the radar a little bit recently, hasn't he? He's been hiding out because he doesn't want to draw too much attention to himself, because obviously his name will be on the ballot in November, and he really wants to keep his job so he can continue doing nothing and just showing off. Interesting video here that I'm going to show of him on Fox News, where he is basically pleading for people to send money so that he can try and win back his own job, because the Democrats are out fundraising him significantly. Just enjoy the desperation in Ted Cruz in this clip.
I'm right now, as you know, in a very tough re-election race in Texas. The Democrats, Chuck Schumer has made clear I'm his #1 target. The Democrats intend to spend over $100 million to defeat me in Texas. We just had a poll last week that showed it as a 1-point race, and yet we can expect Mitch again not to spend any money to defend me, which means the only way that we hold on is if the folks watching this show go to tedcruz.org right now, go online to tedcruz.org, make a contribution of $5, $10, $25, $50, $100, because my race, my support is not from the big money special interests in Washington, D.C. It is from constitutional conservatives across the country who go to tedcruz.org and who help give me the resources to withstand $100 million from these left-wing Democrats and Marxists who are trying to invade this country and destroy this country.
I mean, he really gets desperate at the end, doesn't he? Where he's like, Marxists who are invading the country. Well, they're already here. I'm a Marxist, and so are you. Well, welcome to America.
His opponent, the problem for Ted is his opponent is definitely not a Marxist. And and so Ted, the reason why that's the first time, and I watch all the Ted stuff, that's the first time that he's said anything like that in this campaign. So I think he just woke up and realized that there's some issues here. He's not running against Beto O'Rourke this time, and Democrats love Beto with good reason, but he's a little flighty, he's a little all over the place, and he's probably not the best Democrat to win a statewide race in a place like Texas. Okay, he probably needed to stay in his fairly liberal district and stay in Congress, but he kind of got a little carried away. But Colin Allred, who's running against Ted, is not that. I mean, he's a former NFL football player, great looking guy, speaks well. His district is Dallas, which is a huge metropolitan area. He represents the Dallas suburbs and part of Dallas. And Ted has been so busy running around with doing his podcast and selling his books and this and that I think he's kind of been asleep at the switch and it sort of has taken this reelection for granted. And what has happened is a couple of things recently that's caused him to wake up, which is number one is the fundraising numbers came in and Allred raised a big chunk of change fourth quarter. Yeah. Ted didn't. And number two separate polls have come out recently that are reliable polls. In one poll, Allred's down 2 points, and in another poll, he's down 1. So, yeah, Ted is a little bit concerned, and obviously Donald Trump is soaking up a lot of the money and the oxygen in the room for Republican candidates. And then the final thing he noted there is Mitch McConnell. Okay, Mitch McConnell controls the purse strings for the Republican Senatorial Campaign Committee. He decides where the money's going to go. And number one, he hates Ted Cruz. So he's not going to be looking to do Ted Cruz any favors. And number two, they have prioritized Montana, Arizona, and Pennsylvania and Ohio. And that's where he's going to put his money and maybe even Colorado. That's where Mitch is going to put his money. He's not going to give a dime to Ted. So yes, on the other side, Schumer is probably going to commit some resources to Texas to make this a race. And so what Ted is saying there is entirely accurate. He's got some problems.
I get the feeling that he comes over as a very kind of old school politician now, right? He's been around for a while. Obviously, that beard still hasn't grown into his face. And I get the sense that he's kind of taken his eye off the ball.
Yep.
And it's all a little bit late now. There's going to be a lot of scrambling around to try and drum up some interest. Maybe he took for granted that he thought that he would have a job for life because, he is a made-for-television politician and he does, like to go and, he can handle interviews and stuff like that. But the reality is the world has changed since Ted Cruz showed up. And people now recognize that we need more effective politicians who are not in it for themselves.
Yeah. There are a lot of the MAGA people aren't thrilled with him. He didn't endorse Trump until just recently. He didn't endorse Trump until DeSantis dropped out. So that's kind of aggravated MAGA. He's spent a lot of time going around the country campaigning for all these other candidates, which is for himself laying the groundwork to run for president in 28. That's why he did it. But the bottom line is he spends a lot of time outside of Texas. And the other thing is a couple other little things. The Uvalde massacre, he was handled very poorly by him. He made a lot of terrible, stupid statements and he got a lot of backlash. Yeah. And, when they had the power outage, the Cancun thing, which we all laugh about, but Texans were pretty pissed off at Ted. So these things all add up. And even though, yes, I'm not trying to give out too much hopium. I'm aware it's still Texas, but the demographics of Texas have slowly been changing. Democrats are making progress in Texas and gaining ground. So I think Allred's got a shot. That's all I'm going to say.
Okay. Interesting prediction. We'll obviously be able to come back and yay or nay that one in a few months' time. We need to take a quick pause for our sponsor, but when we come back, I want to talk about Alina Habah and her groveling letter, not quite of apology, but her washing her hands with the situation, and also the fact that Donald Trump has said that he's now looking for new representation. So, is that the last we see of Alina? We'll discuss that next here on Uncovered.
Are you self-conscious about your smile due to stains? Are your teeth aging you? Food and drink are known to stain teeth. Coffee, wine, they stain over time. So what can you do to brighten your smile? Well, you should give Smile Actives a try. Smile Actives is safe, effective, easy to use, and will keep you smiling proudly. I personally have been to a dentist and had a teeth whitening treatment. It was painful, it was uncomfortable, and it was not a experience that I would want to repeat. Well, simply add Smile Actives Pro Whitening Gel to your regular toothpaste. Do it at home. It's been formulated with polyclean technology to boost stain removal and deliver active whitening ingredients into teeth's grooves to get better whitening. People will start commenting on your whiter, brighter smile in just days. Smile Actives is the whitening boost your favorite toothpaste needs to give you the smile you deserve. Visit smileactives.com/uncovered today to receive a special buy one, get one free offer with auto delivery plus free shipping and handling. That's smileactives.com/uncovered. Terms and conditions apply. See site for details.
Look at these teeth. They're literally lighting up the whole room. I love the way that you've always spoken about Alina Habah. We've talked about her a lot. We analyze her relationship with Donald Trump. He was kind of scraping the bottom of the barrel in terms of lawyers running out of people to represent him. We talked about Joe Tacopina clearing off and leaving Alina Habah to kind of, be there recently for the E. Jean Carroll trial, the defamation trial. And now just bring us up to date before I show this letter, and we can talk about the letter.
Well, a couple of the latest thing, of course, is Trump made that post saying what you alluded to, talking about how he's shopping for lawyers. I think people have sort of focused on the wrong thing on that post. What everybody made fun of was saying, well, this must mean he's fired Alina Habah. That's not true. Alina Habah is not an appellate lawyer. When you hire lawyers for an appeal, you're not going to hire the trial lawyer. You're going to bring in a new set of lawyers that specialize in appeals. Okay. There's a difference between a brain surgeon and a heart doctor, between a trial lawyer and an appellate lawyer. But
he must be
that's
unhappy
not really
with
the
her,
news.
Surely he must be unhappy because she just cost him. What was it in the end? 38 million?
83 million.
Oh, sorry. I got my numbers the wrong way around.
You got to mix them back. But the news in that story is the fact that he's even putting that out there. He should have had an appellate lawyer already lined up, ready to go. He knew he was going to lose. The fact that he's shopping around and even putting it out on the internet, hey, does anybody want to do my appeal? That's really the funny part of the story. Yeah. It's not that he's firing Habah.
It's like he's asking for a social media manager, except
it's like, anybody want to represent me out there? I got some cash flow problems, but maybe I can make monthly payments,
Yeah, but because he doesn't pay, and I suppose that is another part of this story, isn't it? That Rudy Giuliani was owed a whole bunch of cash, and now it turns out
we're going to find out the rest of that story tonight.
Right.
Because the filings are due today from the PACs.
Yeah.
So by midnight, we will know how much he has spent on lawyers in 2023. So this is a big thing I'm waiting to find out, because the New York Times is reporting, according to sources, that it's in excess of $50 million that he spent on lawyers. That's staggering. That's way more than he spent on any other part of his campaign.
Yeah.
And it's only going to get worse. These things are all heating up. So yeah, we'll find out by the end of today how much he spent in 2023. It's got to be a staggering amount.
And he hasn't won anything yet. That's the other thing.
Lose.
For all of this spending, it's just to lose. It's like going to the Trump casino. So this is the letter that Alina Habah wrote. It's probably too small for any of us to read, but she basically kind of writes, let me see if I can see it. I write in response to the letters submitted earlier by the plaintiff's lead counsel, She's basically saying that the claim that she made, I'll kind of paraphrase, the claim that she made to say that the judge was in cahoots with the lawyer was because that they'd been at the same firm for a couple of years and that he had mentored her. Is that right? But it turned out that he never mentored her and they probably never even saw each other at the firm anyway. So she just made it up.
This is classic, Trump Habah legal strategy. Yeah. I mean, so after the trial's over, what happened? First of all, before the trial was over, she mentioned in a comment to the press that she heard that the judge had an improper relationship at some point in time with Carol's lawyer. So she actually said that in the press, that there was sources out there. Then lo and behold, after the trial's over, the New York Post does this story where they claim that they have one source who worked in the same law firm as them in the early 90s, who said that the judge in that case, Judge Lewis Kaplan, had mentored Roberta Kaplan, the lawyer for Carol, no relation.
And I was gonna say it's a coincidence that they have the same surname.
Yeah, no relationship. And so then Alina Habah files a letter demanding that, citing this New York Post story and demanding that he disclose any relationship. What happens then is Roberta, 12 hours later, responds and says, Judge, you don't even need, let me respond to this. And she just said, I worked at this huge multinational firm, many offices all over the world. I worked there for about 18 months in the early 90s. I don't even remember Lewis. He was a senior partner. I was a junior associate. He certainly never mentored me. I don't recall ever even speaking to him.
Yeah.
And she said, and furthermore, it looks like Alina Habah is the one who planted this story in the New York Post, who she is apparently the source of this story, and the judge needs to investigate it, and I'm considering asking for sanctions against her. And that's when Habah then filed that letter you just read 2 hours later, saying, oh, you know what? I guess I was mistaken. Let's just forget the whole thing. Classic Habah.
It's so desperate. Like these are the tactics of Trump and his lawyers. To try and find dirt on people, and if it doesn't exist, just make it up. They're not going to get very far with that. And in the meantime, it's just costing Donald Trump in legal fees.
Attack the judge, attack the witnesses, attack the prosecutors. I mean, this is things that trial lawyers don't normally do. I mean, you're going to try and discredit a witness, but you're going to try and do that in front of a jury. You're not going to be doing that out in the press. And you're definitely not going to attack the judge and the opposing counsel or the judge's clerk. These are things that no lawyer would ever do. It's just asinine. And that's why he's losing. And it's why not only is he losing, but I'm going to say that jury verdict might have been $5 or $6 million like the other trial if they hadn't have done all this nonsense. But all this nonsense and craziness made it much worse.
There's no way that you can say that all of these legal issues plaguing Trump and, Giuliani and Peter Navarro and all the people in this orbit is not going to have an effect on the vote in the general election in November. You can't say that. It has to, provided that people are getting access to the information, because, of course, Fox and these kind of silo networks, they tend not to report on this stuff. But they're going to have to as these stories become more and more mainstream. And I recognize that, when Donald Trump won in 2016, we didn't have any of this. We just had the rumors and Hillary Clinton saying, he was dangerous and, she saw the threat of fascism. People didn't really understand or believe her. There was none of this stuff around. And Trump obviously had the help of the Kremlin and various other things, online technology that helped him get elected. He lost in 2020 without any of this stuff. 2024, it is not possible for him to win, considering the amount of material there is out there that people are starting to understand and recognize that he has his fingers in so many kind of illegal pies. Do you think that's fair to say? I mean, I don't want to take it for granted, and I'm touching wood, obviously, but I'm just trying to weigh up the kind of feeling and the mood and the national conversation. It's got to have an effect on the vote, sure.
Well, the polls show one thing quite clearly, which is a conviction is going to matter. That's what people want. People are not making a judgment now, and I think that's part of the American consciousness is innocent until proven guilty.
Give him the benefit of
it's
the
in our
doubt.
DNA, right? Right. We're innocent. We believe that people should get their shot in court, and we're going to presume them innocent. So every poll, though, has said that if Trump is convicted of a criminal charge, that a significant chunk of those voters, including Republican voters, say that they're out. They will not vote for him. And so the only thing that the polls don't do, and here's the big $64,000 question, is it may be that the first trial is going to be the New York one with the Stormy Daniels hush money stuff.
Yeah.
And that is obviously the one that has the least amount of appeal politically as far as, so no poll has ever said, just asked about that case. Well, what if he's convicted just of that? You know, is that going to change your mind? We don't know, because that case is set for trial in March, and the way what was supposed to happen first was the January 6th trial was supposed to go first with Judge Chutkan, but that appears like it's not going to happen, and now it looks like that New York case is going to go first. But my fear is like that's kind of like of the four, the shakiest one. What if he wins that case? Then the opposite could happen. He could get a big bounce. So I'm a little nervous about the court cases. I'd feel a lot better if the documents case was going to trial first.
Well, the documents case might not even get
but
heard.
it's not.
I mean,
it's not. Yeah.
Right. Because I do think that people have, you know, originally with Stormy Daniels, it was like, oh, this is like a thing. She's a porn star. He's a president. I think as with everything, these things kind of people get used to it and it's kind of less impactful. And now people are like, oh, yeah, I like Stormy Daniels. It's so weird, isn't it? How things kind of change. And in fact, she should run for president. She'd definitely do a better job than him. I've got a couple of images from these. We talked briefly about it, the fact that Donald Trump is now being forced to pay Rudy Giuliani's creditors. And here's some of the paperwork from that. Just explain why Trump is due to pay these now and why it's been ruled that he has to, because there's quite a lot of them.
This has been an interesting twist, that's for sure, that I don't think a lot of people expected. We all knew, because this had been reported, that Trump stiffed Rudy his legal bills from 2020, that Rudy was out there doing all this stuff, running around the world, going to Ukraine, doing all these election cases, running up a huge bill, and Trump didn't pay him. Trump paid him a little bit, but not nearly. I think Trump probably paid him 20% of his bill. So he stiffed Rudy, and then Rudy was disbarred and suspended and all that stuff, so he couldn't continue anyway. So, a couple 2-3 years go by, we don't really hear much more about this. Rudy doesn't make a big deal out of it, of course, because he still needs Trump world to grift off of. But the bankruptcy trustee, Rudy had to put on his paperwork, you have to put your assets, and part of your assets as a lawyer is your accounts receivable, what people owe you. And the biggest thing that Rudy is owed from a past client is Donald Trump's legal bills. So basically what happens is the trustee on behalf of Rudy Giuliani, Rudy didn't file this, because once you file bankruptcy, your money becomes sort of, the trustee manages your money to some extent. And so the trustee has basically said, look, Donald Trump is solvent. Donald Trump is one of Rudy's major creditors. Rudy owes all this money to all these other creditors. So we're going to collect on that debt that Trump has refused to pay. We're going to get that money. And so basically what they're going to end up doing is taking those legal fees that Trump stiffed Rudy out of, taking it out of Trump and paying off some of Rudy's creditors, which is going to really upset Trump.
And screw that relationship, potentially, if it's not screwed already, right? Between
Maybe.
Giuliani
It's
and
not
Donald
Rudy's
Trump.
fault. I mean, to some degree, it's not Rudy's fault. He's not the one doing this, but by filing for bankruptcy, which he did to protect himself from the Ruby Freeman, try and protect and shield some of his funds from Ruby Freeman, is going to end up costing Trump money by Rudy doing that. Yeah.
Good. It's the best way to hurt. I mean, it's like that phrase that E. Jean Carroll came out with the other day after the ruling. She was like, I'm gonna collect that money, and because what was the payout for her? I forget the numbers. Was it 100?
Oh, yeah, I don't even remember. It was a lot. It was
a
quite
lot.
a bit.
Yeah.
I don't. There's so much, but you have to add all this in with Trump, as we just talked about, shelling out $50 million for legal fees of his own. He's fighting off Nikki Haley in a Republican primary. He's got all these lawsuits going, all these judgments against him. The last thing he needs is to have to shell out a few million to pay off Rudy's debts. But he's probably going to have to do that.
So E. Jean Carroll said, I'm going to give it to an organization that he hates. Right? Did you hear that quote? It was so good.
I did.
So, hopefully it'll go to a women's charity or, something that is going to really rub him up the wrong way. I just hope that she is able to collect that money. And I heard that her lawyers, they said, we're going to go out of our way to collect that. I mean, they can go after his assets if he's not prepared to give the cash, right?
Yeah, and they're prepared to do that. But, of course, the big question is, he's going to put up all the money in the bond to file the appeal. Is he willing to take on $22,000 a day in accrued interest while the appeal is pending? Most likely for Trump, he's willing to pay the interest. That's not really the big thing for him. But coming up with that big lump sum in bond money to be able to file the appeal is not going to be easy for Trump. I mean, that's a big chunk of change he's going to have to come up with. We'll see. People ask me what's the time limit. I believe it's 30 days. He's got 30 days. And
really? That's good.
We're already about 10 days into that. So,
yes.
Yeah.
Okay, well, maybe he's selling off that beautiful furniture at Mar-a-Lago as we speak. He actually posted the other day about the stock market, didn't he? He kind of claimed that he wanted to take credit for it. He said, this is the Trump stock market because my polls against Biden are so good that investors are projecting that I will win, and that will drive the market up. The market's doing pretty well at the moment. The U.S. economy is doing pretty well. Jobs numbers are looking really good. Inflation is coming down. Joe Biden has a lot to be proud of in terms of, the efforts. And I'm pleased that we avoided recession. And, I'm very impressed with Janet Yellen and some of these people. But for Trump to step in and now claim that this is his win is pretty rich, isn't it, Ron?
I think even this one, MAGA didn't even pick up on this. I think even they were like, okay, man, like the old man is a little far out on the limb on this one. It's been interesting to, I watch all his speeches and all his interviews, so all the rally speeches. So it's been interesting to watch his messaging evolve from 2020 to now, year by year, because, in 2020, of course, this is well documented, has been played by the media many times. He predicted that the stock market would crash and we would have a Great Depression if Biden was elected within short order. Of course, Biden had inherited an economy in the tank with COVID raging and had to clean up that mess, which took quite a while. So, of course, during that time when things were tough, Trump was saying, see, I told you, things are bad, and et cetera, et cetera. Inflation was bad. A lot of economists were predicting a recession, a deep recession. That seemed to be the consensus. The stock market was down. So for a while, Trump was able to kind of say, see, I told you so. But now, the economy is doing better. Things are positive. So in 2022, during the midterms, he shifted that argument. He said, the economy is doing well, but it's just running on the fumes. That was the 2022 message of my work, but these fumes are going to wear off any day now, and that the economy is about to tank. And of course, that didn't happen. So now we're over 3 years out. The fumes argument doesn't really hold water anymore. It's kind of hard to argue the economy 3 years later is still running off those Trump fumes. So now he's come up with a whole new thing, which is the reason why the economy and the stock market is doing well is because people see I'm leading in the polls, and they know I'm going to be coming back, and now they're all confident. And that's, it's just a ridiculous argument. But I mean, it's an argument, I guess, that works with some low IQ voters.
And this is the problem. Trump himself is a low IQ person and a big baby and a narcissist and all of these things that we now know about with these multiple personality disorders. And I just feel like, a little bit like with the court cases, the legal cases that are happening, that even Trump running his mouth about the stock market and claiming that the stock market is up because he's up and therefore people think that there is safety ahead. Americans aren't that stupid.
No.
They're just going to know that he's talking crap, and they're just going to be like, this is just crap. And I think all of this, him running his mouth contributes to his likely election loss, for my money anyway.
Yeah. And he tests these things out at his rallies, but the problem is, these talking points that he tests at his rallies, I mean, just because he gets a positive reaction from MAGA, that's not going to help him in November with swing voters, because they're not, like you said, the swing voters are more educated, believe it or not. They don't pay as much attention to like cable news and political social media, but many of them are educated. But who are they? A lot of them are suburban people in their 30s with young kids that are at Little League practice and at work, and they come home and they might, turn on a sitcom and they go to sleep. They're not watching MSNBC or Fox or Trump rallies. And so these people are not stupid. And what they typically tend to do is tune in about a month out from the presidential election and start paying attention. And usually the debates sort of kick that off, and they make up their mind. And it's those people that Trump polls so poorly with, and messaging like this on the stock market is not going to fly with those voters.
I forgot about the presidential debates until you just mentioned it. I'm like, no.
This may be the first time when there aren't any.
That's what I was
think
thinking.
There's a very good possibility that there are no debates.
Right, because Trump doesn't want to do it. My memories of last time was with Biden just is like, come on, man. Do you remember? It became, I mean, it was terrible, It was just terrible. The talking over each other and it was fascinating. But, it shouldn't be like Romans like watching gladiators in the Colosseum. Like, it shouldn't be that. And yet it has become that.
The reason, of course, Trump claims that, he wants to have 1 million debates, and he's going to be out there saying that. I don't think that the Biden campaign especially wants a lot of debates or even any debates necessarily, because I think that they're content to run on their record and to say, look, this is what we've done. They have enough money to put their messaging out to the voters, and they don't need to get into a clown show, a yelling and screaming match with a maniac like Donald Trump, who's going to talk over you and do what he did last time. So I think to them, they're not really seeing a big benefit in debating Trump. And I think that Trump, on the other hand, is going to want to impose so many conditions and rules on these debates, and who's going to be the moderator. He's going to want to control every aspect of it. And I think that that's probably going to cause a problem as well in terms of making this happen. Yeah. So my prediction is at most there's going to be one debate, and there may not be any.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, if there is to be one, the networks are going to fight over it because, of course, it's big box office for them. Let's talk about drugs, because there's been a leak about the amount of substances that were potentially ingested during Donald Trump's White House. And this is fascinating, isn't it? This is the medical unit. It was posted as a pill mill, thousands of Ambien and various drugs. I mean, let's just take a look at this list. It was posted by Dr. Nick Mark, who said for a clinic that doesn't typically do procedures with moderate sedation, they sure are ordering prodigious quantities of morphine, fentanyl, and ketamine. I mean, what's all this about? Is it really the case that Donald Trump was a drug addict during his White House tenure?
Well, this can't be just one person. Even Trump can consume that many drugs. And you look, it's not only just the fact of the amounts, which are very prodigious, but what they are. I mean, fentanyl, ketamine, Adderall, these are the morphine, these are hardcore, powerful drugs. And so, the question is, like the doc says here, the White House is not a hospital. It's sort of like going to your neighborhood, urgent care center. You're not going in there for any kind of heavy duty stuff.
Yeah.
You know, you're supposed to be going to your primary care doctor for that, or the hospital. You're not supposed to be getting them from the White House doctor, which, by the way, was Ronnie Jackson, who's, you know, pretty notorious himself for, you know, dispensing pills and being a Dr. Feelgood and fudging medical records and saying things that clearly are not true, like Trump is 6'3", 235 and is going to live until he's 200 and is the most, what do you say about Trump? The most fit, you know, healthy person he's ever seen in his whole life, he said about Trump. So we know Ronnie Jackson lies. So the question is, here's the thing. We have all these ex-Trump staffers out in the media, some of whom have turned on Trump and become, you know, media darlings for doing so, and switch parties even, that are out there all the time. I mean, did they not see anything? I mean, it had to be half the White House was taking pills. You know, did they not know anything? We really have to get to the bottom of this, because I think this is a very serious issue. And we see Trump now, and we see him sweating. And by the way, Trump has repeatedly accused Joe Biden of taking these very same drugs on multiple occasions. And we know with him, everything is projection. There's no doubt in my mind he's on a bunch of drugs. And he's always challenged Biden to take drug tests. He's done that before.
Well,
so
he's king of projection, isn't he?
It's always on his mind.
Yeah.
And so that, and you know, he's very erratic. I think he's on something, and I think that these White House doctors' pharmacy records show that something's going on here.
Well, we discussed last week that it's impossible to maintain Trump's schedule at the age of 77, as unfit as he is, doing these, you know, showing up for legal hearings and then doing rallies, and because of time zones. And you said something very interesting last week, which a lot of people commented on, and I quite like to clear this up. You said that he has to go back to Bedminster or to Mar-a-Lago because he does not like to sleep anywhere other than his own bed.
This is true.
Is that really true? And how do you even know this?
Well, because I follow him every single day. I mean, when I post pictures on Twitter saying like, this is what he's doing today, that's what he's doing today. I look, the reason is because I follow so many people in Trump's orbit, and not famous people that you would know.
Yeah.
I follow busboys. I fought Mar-a-Lago and Bedminster. I follow people who work at his golf courses. I make it my business to follow a lot of the people that are members of Mar-a-Lago staff, on Instagram, on Facebook, on their different social media pages, and they post these pictures and videos, and that's how I keep tabs on him. But no, he hates sleeping anywhere on the road. And that's why he has the private plane. I mean, he always makes it a point that he will go give a speech. If he has to give a speech, for example, in Iowa at 9 o'clock at night, and the next day he's going to give a speech in Pennsylvania, he will literally fly to Iowa, give the speech, fly to Mar-a-Lago, sleep at Mar-a-Lago, and then fly to Pennsylvania the next morning. That's what he does.
But why not sleep on the plane in the airport? You know, if you've got a luxurious 757, why even go back to Mar-a-Lago? I mean, I know that he's a germaphobe, and there's been plenty of reporting of that. Do you think this is connected to that in any way, that he needs to, you know, feel safe and clean?
I think it's more paranoia over, you know, him being bugged or recorded or filmed in, you know, he certainly will never he'll never stay at a hotel room that he doesn't own. I mean, if he owns a property in like Las Vegas, he'll stay there, or in New York, you know, he'll stay at Trump Tower, but he will not stay at a property that he doesn't own and control the environment. And I think it's his paranoia about anything behind the scenes being recorded. We don't ever see him without a shirt on. You know, we don't ever see him without his hair combed. We don't ever see those. Even I don't get that stuff. Very, very rarely do I ever get anything, because he doesn't ever want the public to see that. It's literally the Wizard of Oz behind the curtain.
Yeah.
Because if the public saw him with his shirt off and without his makeup and without his hair combed, they'd be probably pretty shocked.
Terrifying. The idea of a paparazzi getting in with a long lens with his boobs out at the beach is not something I want to see.
Pasty white.
Yeah. Oof. I want to talk about Karine Jean-Pierre made a very interesting point, and this is about the fact that, you know, so many Republicans did not vote for the infrastructure bill. And yet so many Republicans, lawmakers, governors and Congress people are then taking the credit for the infrastructure changes in their district. Let's just have a quick listen to this.
One thing that I will say, and I don't want to get ahead of it, I think you saw a tweet from a congressman from Minnesota 8 who touted the bipartisan infrastructure law, something that this Congressman Stauber, who did not vote for it. What's interesting is it was a bipartisan piece of legislation. Obviously, we were thankful to Republicans who did work with the president to put forth this bipartisan infrastructure law and voted for it and pushed for it. But there are some Republicans who didn't, and they see the benefits of this particular law and now are touting it, but didn't vote for it, did not vote for it at all.
And this is played out in several ways. There was a clip from South Florida on a CBS News Miami interview with one of these Congress people who effectively pretended to forget. We can't show the clip, unfortunately, because of copyright. But it was a very interesting kind of interchange. Just explain what happened here.
Yeah, well, she was confronted by several projects that she was bragging about and went and presented checks and was at the ribbon cutting and this and that. And she's a Republican congressman from the Miami area. And she voted against every single one of them. And when she was confronted by it, she at first kind of tried to change the subject or deny that she voted, but she got pinned down on it, as a good interviewer will do. And eventually she just finally said, I don't really remember what I voted for. She did not. She just had memory loss all of a sudden. She didn't remember what she voted for and what she didn't. So I can tell you this, that, the Biden administration has been a little frustrated by how long it took for some of these projects to get started, to get rolling. The money was allocated back in 2021 and 2022. And a lot of these projects are just now ramping up. Thankfully, they're ramping up before the elections. They can make some difference here, but also a difference in the economy as well. I think a lot of the upturn you're seeing in the economy is because of a lot of these projects are happening. And so what is happening is Biden is starting to go out around the country to some of these things and, take credit for it, because look, this is all Biden's stuff. These are his initiatives. He absolutely can put his stamp on every one of these things because they were his ideas. And so what's also happening, though, since it's an election year, is Republicans, when these projects are happening in their districts, they're showing up and claiming credit when time after time after time we're finding out that they voted against these projects. So yes, this is going to continue to play out, and it's great that the Biden administration is calling these people out for it. Their response, what is their argument? She did a terrible job answering the questions, but typically the Republican argument that you hear is, well, I was in favor of this project, but I didn't like everything else in the bill. So, right. I mean, but that's the way Congress works. I mean, you don't vote for one project at a time because there's thousands of them. You either vote for the bill or you don't. So it's just a lame excuse, but good for the Biden administration for calling them out.
Let's talk about Kari Lake, because she has been going around telling everybody that she's such a great candidate. She's now trying to, get the Arizona Senate after losing the governorship. I have a feeling that maybe she's not as well liked as she thinks she is. And I've thought this for quite a while. And in fact, on one of that leaked tape that we listened to, I think it was last week, you heard her telling, because this was like an extortion thing, and she was kind of saying, look, I'm a great candidate. The people of Arizona, they love me. Do you think that really is the case? Because I have a video that I'm about to show of her being booed.
The whole reason why that guy, who was the state party chair for the Arizona Republican Party, and her benefactor, somebody who paid her over $100,000 while she was running for governor, as a quote unquote advisor. So in other words, this guy had paid her over $100,000 to do nothing, to just run for governor. So this is not somebody who's hostile to her. This is one of her best friends that she recorded, or at least somebody who is financing her operation. The reason why, what he was trying to do is, the reason why he's trying not to have her run is because they don't believe she's the best candidate for they believe that she's toxic. that they can run somebody much better in the Republican primary that can beat Gallego, and Kari Lake is the worst possible candidate. That's why they didn't want her to run. So you start there. And yes, you're right. The question is, how much is all of her election denial mania, getting sued for defamation, which she is now being sued by a Republican election official for defamation, all of that craziness, all of her Trumpy running around the country with Trump, what effect was that going to have? Has she gone down in popularity since she lost in 2022 or up? We didn't really know, but I think we're getting a real good snapshot here because this is the state Republican meeting, the big meeting to replace the chair that she recorded, who was forced to resign. And she was loudly booed and heckled by her own people. These are hardcore Republicans. If they're booing Kari Lake, she is in trouble.
Here it is.
Oh my God. Greetings, Arizona Republicans. I know we've proven today that we don't agree.
Who with the one-time
We don't agree on everything, but one thing we do agree on is the elections in Arizona are a corrupt mess.
Yeah, including
We
here.
agree that
Including right
elections are a
here.
mess in Arizona.
Very clear boos there. Some excellent boos, I would say. Probably some of the best boos I've heard in a while, don't you think?
Those aren't climate change protesters.
No.
Those are MAGA Republicans booing her. So yeah, it's just obviously she did not expect that. She was taken aback. She was definitely rattled. And in fact, a lot of times when I'll post like Republican politicians getting booed, they'll push back. Certainly Trump people do. And the Lake people do follow me on social media. So when I posted that, I was definitely expecting to get a denial back from Team Lake and for them to deny she was booed. They did not. And people who were in the room, Republicans, posted on social media that it was 80% boos. There was a handful of people who cheered, but it was 80% boos. And this is a Republican crowd. So yeah, I mean, we're also going to, by the way, have the decision from Kristen Sinema very soon. Supposed to come within the next few weeks if she's going to run. She hasn't announced yet. But I think if it's head-to-head, Gallego against Lake, Gallego's in good shape here.
It's fake boos, Ron. Fake boos.
Fake boos. Right.
I want to finish with this incredible debate, this GOP debate for CD4. This was with Lauren Boebert, where candidates were asked to raise their hands if they'd been arrested. And you would have thought that, potential lawmakers probably would not be raising their hands. Looks like pretty much all of them did. 6 candidates raised their hands, including Lauren Boebert and Mike Lynch. And then they proceeded to cheer and high-five each other at the prospect that they were all arrestees. Let's take a look at this incredible moment.
Do we get to say what for? Maybe it doesn't matter.
Well, we're here.
Do we get to say what for? I mean, what's your take on this? I don't really know where to start.
This is the MAGA Republican Party. I mean, they asked how many of you have been arrested, and 6 out of the 9 candidates raised their hands. So this is this is a Republican Party that I am not familiar with from 30 years as an activist in the party. If you had one person raise their hand, people would boo and they'd be mortified. But it doesn't seem to bother this crowd. It's interesting. She clearly has the best name recognition, and whoever wins this primary is going to win. No. That's the reason why she switched to this district in Eastern Colorado, is because it's very strong Republican. Like, no Democrat can win it. So whoever wins this primary is going to get it. And so the question is she going to be able, how much is her carpetbagger stuff, all her drama, all the craziness? Do these people in Eastern Colorado really want that? They want to import this congressperson from Western Colorado or not? I mean, they did a straw poll of the people at the debate. I'm not really big on straw polls that much, but she seemed very shocked that she came in 5th in that straw poll. I think she only got like 23 votes out of the people in the room. So, I mean, that you can't read too much into straw polls, but that kind of, I think, surprised her a little bit, considering she's the name that everybody knew and she finished 5th. So I think she could be in trouble for 2 big reasons. I think they don't really care that much about her crazy MAGA stuff because that's who those voters are. I think they care about the Beetlejuice thing, and they don't want to be embarrassed. All the drama, all the arrests, all the missed votes, all that kind of stuff that comes with Boebert. And the carpetbagger stuff, the fact that she abandoned her district and is moving in there, I think will affect her as well.
Wouldn't it be nice if people like Lauren Boebert and Marjorie Taylor Greene, the real kind of far right loudmouth extremists who will shout liar during the State of the Union address to the president, stuff like that. Matt Gaetz is another one. Wouldn't it be great if they all lost? And I throw Ted Cruz into that group as well. And we would never have to hear from these people ever again. It would be the greatest Christmas gift that we could get in November.
It really would. Green is not going to lose. Okay. But, the funny thing is that Green yesterday was taunting Boebert about that straw poll.
Yeah.
They don't like each other at all anymore. They really dislike each other intensely. It had a lot to do with the McCarthy thing, but I think it goes deeper than that. I think it's just a rivalry where there's a lot of jealousy and hogging the spotlight. Only one can have the spotlight, right?
It's a little bit like you and me, Ron, on this show.
Yeah,
I feel there's a similar animosity between us for as a popularity contest.
No, man, no, not for me. but no, what was funny was Green was making fun of Boebert, that she came in 5th in that straw poll, which I thought was pretty funny.
Okay. Listen, we got to finish, but always a pleasure. Great to see you. He's Ron Filipkowski. I'm Anthony Davis. You can download the podcast, the audio podcast tonight from wherever you get yours. And don't forget to check out MidasTouch.com for the very latest news, much of it curated by Ron himself. And we'll be back next Wednesday with another episode of Uncovered. Take care. See you then.